What is good, YouTube? Who was like God is back, and I actually brought the whiteboard back for this one. Now, what I wanted to do was I wanted to give four main realms of reality, so to speak, that point to why I believe in God and why I believe in Christ, which are number one, contemporary, resurrection, quantum physics, and prophecy. Contemporary meaning contemporary miracles and things that we can look at, miracle cases, near-death experiences, even accounts of individuals who have died, and we have their the medical record of their death, their certificate of death, who have since are alive and well now, and such. It's examining contemporary cases that point to Christ, because the only independent variable is intercessory prayer towards Christ and towards God. So, as well as various visions and things that many Muslims are causing them to come to Christ, which is more conversions from Islam to Christ than in the 14 centuries of Islam. So this is not just to believe these things open-handedly because it supports my case, but it's actually to look at these things and put them under scrutiny, because when you do, there's a remnant of miracle claims and a remnant of near-death experiences and things like that, where naturalism isn't a good explanation. There's a remnant where you see that placebos are not a good explanation, and that what happens to the people sometimes even surpasses what you would expect a placebo to happen. Even cases where people who don't believe and who have a bias against miracles are healed, where placebo is off the table entirely. So for that reason, I want to let me get this book called by Randy Clark called Eyewitness to Miracles. All right. So yeah, let me think. Is there anything I disagree with him about? Well, even if there is, I still endorse the book because there's a layer of objectivity to looking at just miracle claims and putting them under scrutiny and acknowledging when there could be an alternative explanation. But in doing so, you're going to find the remnant where there isn't any good naturalistic explanation. So the presence of contemporary miracles and visions and near-death experiences point to an abstract consciousness after death, and to the reality of Christ being the Son of the living God and the one who has power over demons and things in the modern day that we can look and test with our own eyes in the same way we look at the movement of the apostles 2,000 years ago. Then we have prophecy, one of my favorite subjects, the non-presuppositional prophecy argument. That's basically big words to saying we look at the Old Testament and look at various prophecies that Christ fulfilled, but we look at them without even coming into the ring with presupposing he's the Messiah or that he did all his miracles. If we just look at what Christ did and the way he affected the world in objective fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies, just looking at the text, reading word for word what they say, and look at what happened in the world and in history, and we actually undertake to calculate the odds of a single person, a single ancient Hebrew fulfilling all of these things, then we get to see that even without going into the miracles or going into the resurrection, Christ fulfilled all these objective things against all calculable odds. The odds of just looking at what Christ did historically, if we use very generous numbers, is extremely high. It's out of the realm of possibility to think it's all just make-believe or all just coincidence. Which brings me to my next thing, quantum physics. Because now we're at a point now with quantum mechanics and digital physics where we can essentially say that there is a foundational mind or a foundational consciousness behind the simulation of the universe or behind reality. Now that's a way of basically saying we're at a point where we can establish the existence of a foundational mind, a foundational consciousness that is that predates the existence of the universe and space and time and everything like that, and was the reason for its existence. So it's pretty fascinating that we're at that point now. Inspiring philosophy did great stuff about this. But what's fascinating is, again, we're at a point where we can establish the existence of what we would use the English word God to describe. The foundational consciousness, the foundational intelligent force behind the universe as we know it. And then we could get into why I think the Bible is the accurate revelation of God, of this higher power to humanity. Part of that goes with prophecy and the resurrection, because all these prophecies, even the ones that don't regard Christ, fulfilled against all odds, against really high odds, and then the ones that a single man fulfilled just looking at his effect on history and the things he did in his ministry, and calculating the odds of a single individual doing all of these things and having those impacts. I rely heavily on Peter Stoner's work with that. And then finally, the resurrection argument in general on a historical level, looking at the historical movement of the apostles and of Christ and for the resurrection, especially when we don't have a bias against the supernatural. The resurrection for Christ on a merely historical level is very strong. We have hundreds of eyewitnesses from the first century, individuals who believed they had seen and interacted with the risen Christ apart from the preaching of the apostles. We have hundreds of people that believed they had seen and had personal experiences with the resurrected Christ. Even people who didn't believe at first, such as James, and even people who were adversarial, like the Apostle Paul. So on a merely historical level, the case for the resurrection is extremely strong. But when you bring in all these other things, such as all the prophecies Christ fulfilled, and how things that happen to Christ fit exactly with how God says he would vindicate the servant in the book of Isaiah. So from that perspective, we could go on and say that what happened with Christ, we can look and see God's vindication of him if we already accept that there is a God, which we can get to, I would say, from quantum physics, because exactly what happens to Christ, him being exalted by kings and by royalty, is how God says he would vindicate the servant's ministry in the book of Isaiah. All right, so that Bible provides us a framework of a real Messiah who comes, who's going to do all these things, and that provides us the framework to, when we get to Christ, look at Christ, who was descended from David, look at the way he affected the world and did all of these things, and actually put them to scrutiny against the Old Testament backdrop. And when we do, we find some really interesting things. So these are the main 4 reasons, the main 4 reality bubbles of why I am a Christian, and intellectually speaking. I also have my own personal experiences that I believe is God revealing himself to me, which maybe one day I'll give my testimony about that. But contemporary miracles and records, prophecies, not presuppositional prophecies fulfilled, quantum physics, and resurrection. So what I want to do on this channel is try to cultivate an open platform where we can chop it up and have discussions about these things. And I want to do what I can to point people to God's kingdom, but in an objective way. You feel me? On an objective basis, not using bad arguments or, I'm not going to try to bring you into God's kingdom I'm not going to be like, well, God is real and Christ is real, so you just got to believe. You just got to believe. I'm going to try to show you all these different things in reality, even outside of the Bible, as to why I believe these things are real. Even bring the law of mathematics into it when we put it under scrutiny and look at the things that Christ did in the world. So that is one thing I want to do with this channel. So as the Spirit leads, I'm going to be touching on these different subjects, these main reality bubbles through my channel about why I believe and different things and different arguments and nuances between these things, because these things stand on their own, but sometimes there is overlap. There can be overlap between these main things, such as prophecy and resurrection, like when we look at Isaiah 53 and things like that. So I just want to put that out there. And the final message I want to conclude on is my advice not to compartmentalize. And what I mean by that is basically don't reduce your faith to an intellectual argument. Don't reduce your faith to one intellectual argument. You know what I'm saying? Like, go on, live your life, have fun with your friends, do what you gotta do, pray to God, have your time with God, and go on and keep it pushing. Because the way my mind works, I like to have frameworks, different frameworks to think about things and to better understand them. But sometimes I'll get obsessive about frameworks and repeatedly think things over and over and over and over again until I would get that good feeling after putting all the pieces together for the 100th time. And that's something that God has brought me out of. So I don't compartmentalize in that sense anymore. I can look at things and put things together, but I'm not obsessive about thinking about it or reducing my faith to this to one argument. You get what I'm saying? Don't over intellectualize your faith to the point where you can't live your day-to-day life and just actively live out your relationship with God and your friends and your family. It's like this: since you can trust Christ, so too can you know him. You feel me? So hopefully that'll bless someone today. That was one piece of advice I want to give you. So just to put that all out there. But on a purely intellectual level, studying, God has given us brains and logic and minds. Using brains and logic and minds, these are the 4 main reality bubbles, things in reality as to why I believe in God and why I know God is real and why I know Christ is who he said he was. So y'all be blessed in the Messiah. Again, I want to create an open platform where we can discuss these things, but I just wanted to give these four main realms just to bring it to the forefront and to get other people to hear about them and to chop it up and to think about these things, and as the Spirit wills, hopefully can bless somebody to inquire. So y'all be blessed, and I'll see you in the next video.